You're probably wondering why I'm currently standing on my back porch at 6 a.m., holding a lukewarm cup of coffee, staring up at a galvanized steel structure that looks like it was stolen from a Cold War listening post. You're probably wondering why my neighbor, Gavin, is standing on the other side of the fence, clutching his chest like he's witnessing a murder, his face a color that can only be described as litigation purple. It's a fair question. It really is. To the untrained eye, it looks like I've lost my mind. It looks like I've declared war on the very concept of suburban aesthetic unity. And, in a way, I have. But I didn't fire the first shot. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted to watch the Giants lose in high definition. That's it. That's the inciting incident of this entire fiasco. A football game. We live in Whispering Pines. It's one of those neighborhoods where the grass is genetically engineered to never grow past 2 inches, and the houses are all painted in shades of beige that have names like Sandstorm, Dune, and Desert Despair. It's nice. I'm not gonna lie. It's quiet. The property values are high. But the soul of the place? The soul is owned by a 3-ring binder known as the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. And the keeper of the binder is Gavin. I knew Gavin was trouble the day I moved in. He didn't bring a fruit basket. He didn't bring a 6-pack. He brought a measuring tape to check if my mailbox was the regulation 42 inches from the curb. It was 41 inches. He let me off with a warning that time, a benevolent God granting mercy to the ignorant peasant. I should have known then. I should have sold the house and moved to a yurt in Montana. But I stayed. And for 3 years we had a Cold War, a détente. I mowed my lawn on Saturdays. I brought my trash cans in before sunset. I waved when I saw him, and he would offer a curt, tight-lipped nod, the kind of nod you give to someone you suspect is secretly harboring termites. Then came the football season. I'm a Giants fan living in Colorado. This is a special kind of hell. The local broadcasts are all Broncos, all the time. If the Broncos are playing, it's on TV. If the Broncos aren't playing, they're talking about why the Broncos aren't playing. If the Broncos lost, they're replaying the loss in slow motion. Finding a Giants game is like trying to find a decent bagel west of the Mississippi. It's possible, but it usually involves a lot of disappointment. I tried the streaming route. I really did. I paid for the apps. I paid for the deluxe packages. But the internet in our luxury community is routed through copper wires that were apparently laid down during the Lincoln administration. Every time Daniel Jones dropped back to pass, the screen would freeze. I'd be staring at a pixelated helmet for 30 seconds, screaming at the TV, only for the stream to catch up just in time to show the other team celebrating in the end zone. I couldn't take it anymore. I'm a simple man. I work hard. I pay my taxes. I just want to sit in my recliner on a Sunday, drink a domestic beer, and watch my team disappoint me in real-time 4K resolution. So, I called the satellite guys. "We can get you set up," the guy on the phone said. "Direct line of sight, no buffering." "We too." Pure signal from the sky. "Do it," I said. "I don't care what it costs." The installer, a guy named Dave who looked like he had been smoking unfiltered cigarettes since he was 6 years old, showed up on a Tuesday. Dave was a professional. He looked at the roof. He looked at the sky. He looked at the massive oak tree in my backyard. "Gotta put it on the chimney," Dave grunted, hiking up his tool belt. "South facing. Only spot that clears the tree line." "Will it be visible?" I asked. I wasn't thinking about the HOA. I was thinking about my wife, Sarah, who thinks technology is ugly and should be hidden inside wicker baskets. "Ah," Dave said, shrugging. "It's gray. The roof is gray. If you squint, it looks like a vent." "Sold." Dave scampered up the ladder like a squirrel with a cordless drill. He bolted the dish to the fascia board right next to the chimney. It wasn't one of those massive C-band dishes from the 80s that people turned into gazebos. It was small, 18 inches, an oval of liberation. He ran the cable. He hooked up the box. He turned on the TV. It was beautiful. The grass on the screen was greener than the grass in my yard. The sound was crisp. I could hear the quarterback's cadence. I could hear the crunch of pads. I sat there for 20 minutes, just flipping channels, basking in the glory of uncompressed data. I was happy. For exactly 48 hours, I was a happy man. It was Thursday evening. I was in the garage trying to organize my tools, which mostly involves moving a pile of screwdrivers from one bench to another, when I heard the crunch of footsteps on the driveway. Distinct footsteps. Heel toe, the rhythm of authority. I turned around. Gavin was standing at the threshold of the garage. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking up at the roof line, shading his eyes with one hand, holding his clipboard with the other. He was wearing his uniform, khaki cargo shorts, ironed disturbingly, a polo shirt tucked in so tight it looked like it was cutting off circulation to his lower extremities, and boat shoes. Gavin has never been on a boat. I doubt Gavin has ever seen a body of water larger than a bathtub. "Evening, Gavin," I said, wiping grease off my hands. I tried to keep it casual. Maybe he was just admiring the architecture. He slowly lowered his hand and fixed me with a gaze that was equal parts disappointment and delight. It was the look a traffic cop gives you when he clocks you doing 55 and a 35. "Jack," he said. His voice was nasally, the kind of voice that sounds like it's being filtered through a trumpet mute. "We have a problem." "Do we?" I leaned against my workbench. "I didn't leave the bins out, did I? I'm pretty sure I pulled them in." "It's not the bins," he said. He tapped the clipboard with a pen. Tap, tap, tap. "It's the modification to the exterior of the primary dwelling." My stomach dropped. "The dish?" "The satellite receiving device," he corrected. "Article 4, Section C, Paragraph 2 of the Whispering Pines Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions." He didn't read it. He recited it from memory, staring unblinkingly into my eyes. "No external antennas, satellite dishes, or receiving devices of any kind shall be affixed to the exterior of any home, fence, or outbuilding without the express written consent of the Architectural Control Committee." I let out a long sigh. "Gavin, come on. It's tiny. It's behind the chimney. You have to be standing exactly where you are right now to even see it." "Visibility is not the metric, Jack. Compliance is the metric." He stepped into the garage. He was crossing the line now. "You didn't submit a request form. You didn't get a color swatch approval. You just bolted it on." "It's for the football games," I said, trying to appeal to his non-existent sense of humanity. "The cable internet here is trash. You know that. You complained about it on Nextdoor last week." "The quality of the internet is a separate issue. The issue is the visual blight you have installed on your roof. It breaks the roof line. It disrupts the harmony of the streetscape." "Visual blight? It's 18 inches wide. It's gray. It matches the shingles." "It is a foreign object," Gavin said, scribbling something on a pink form. "And it is unauthorized. You are in violation." He ripped the pink sheet off the pad. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet garage. He held it out to me. I didn't take it. "I'm not taking it down, Gavin." He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was a tight, grimacing smirk. "You have 72 hours to remove the device and patch the mounting holes. After that, fines will accrue at $50 per day. Additionally, if we have to hire a contractor to remove it, you will be billed for labor and administrative fees." "You're kidding me." "I never kid about the covenants, Jack. Read the bylaws." "You signed them." He placed the pink slip gently on my workbench, right next to a can of WD-40. "Have a pleasant evening." He turned and walked away. I watched him go. He walked with a bounce in his step. He was energized. He had found a violation. His day was complete. I picked up the pink slip. Notice of non-compliance. Violation. Unauthorized exterior attachment. I crumbled it up and threw it into the trash can. "I'm not taking it down," I said to the empty garage. "No way." But I underestimated the machine. The HOA isn't just a person. It's a bureaucracy. It's a hydra. You cut off one head, and 3 more send you certified letters. 3 days later, the first fine arrived in the mail, $50. I ignored it. 3 days after that, another letter, $100. Plus a warning that a lien would be placed on the property if the balance wasn't settled within 30 days. My wife, Sarah, found the letter. She is the rational one in our relationship. She is the one who stops me from honking at slow drivers and reminds me to eat vegetables. Jack, she said, holding the letter up like a dead rat. What is this? It's Gavin being a tyrant, I said, not looking up from my iPad. It says we owe $150, and it says Leon. Jack, I am not losing this house because you want to watch the Giants lose. They might win this year, I mumbled, though I knew it was a lie. Fix it, she said. Go to the meeting, talk to them, be reasonable. You're good at talking to people. Charm them. Get a variance. She was right, I could do this. I managed a team of 20 truckers for a living. I negotiated logistics contracts. I could handle a suburban HOA board. The monthly board meeting was held in the basement of the community clubhouse. The room was cold, smelling of stale coffee and floor wax. There were about 10 chairs set up for the audience, which consisted of me and old Mrs. Higgins, who was there to complain about a squirrel that she believed was mocking her. The board sat at a long folding table at the front of the room. Gavin was in the center, naturally. To his left was Linda, the treasurer, a woman who looked at every spreadsheet like it was a personal insult. To his right was Ken, the secretary, a man so checked out of reality that I'm pretty sure he was astral projecting to a beach in Maui. Next item, Gavin said, banging a small wooden gavel that he had definitely bought himself. Resident Jack Miller. Violation appeal regarding the dish. He said the dish, the way one might say, the syphilis. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I put on my best reasonable neighbor face. Hi, everyone, I said. Look, I know we have rules. I respect the rules. But I'm asking for a variance here. The dish is necessary for reliable service. It's installed in the most discreet location possible, and honestly, taking it down would leave holes in the roof that could cause leaks. It's strictly a functional necessity. I pulled out photos I had taken. I have exhibits. Exhibit A shows the view from the street. You can't see it. Exhibit B shows the view from my patio. You can barely see it. It's not hurting anyone. Linda adjusted her glasses. They were on a chain. Of course they were on a chain. Mr. Miller, the issue isn't just visibility. It's the slippery slope. If we allow you to have a dish without approval, what stops the next person from putting up a neon sign? Or a windmill? It's a satellite dish, Linda. It's for TV. It's pretty standard technology. We aren't talking about a windmill. The bylaws are clear, Gavin interrupted. No devices without prior approval. You didn't ask. You just did. That is an act of disrespect to this body and to your neighbors. I didn't know I needed permission to watch ESPN, Gavin. Ignorance of the law is no excuse, Gavin shot back. He looked around at the other board members. I move to uphold the fines and demand immediate removal. All in favor? Aye, said Linda. Huh? Oh yeah, aye, mumbled Ken, wiping drool from his chin. Motion carries, Gavin said, slamming the gavel. You have 24 hours to remove the device. Jack, the fines currently total $300. Please pay Linda on your way out. I stood there, stunned. It wasn't the ruling that got me. It was the speed, the dismissal. They didn't even look at the photos. They didn't care. It wasn't about the aesthetic. It was about the power. It was about Gavin getting to tell another grown man what he could and could not do with his own property. I felt a heat rising in my chest. It started in my stomach and worked its way up to my throat. It was the pure, distilled rage of the suburban dad. So that's it? I asked, my voice tight. Take it down or else? That's it, Gavin said, shuffling his papers. Next item, Mrs. Higgins and the mocking squirrel. I walked out of that basement. I walked past the pool. I walked past the tennis courts. I got into my truck and sat there, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I could feel the injustice of it. It was petty, yes. In the grand scheme of the world, a satellite dish is nothing. But it was my satellite dish. It was my house. And some guy in boat shoes was telling me I couldn't have it because he liked the color beige too much. I went home. I grabbed a ladder. It was dark, but I didn't care. I climbed up onto the roof. Sarah came out onto the patio. Jack, what are you doing? I'm taking it down, I yelled. They won! The fascists won! I ripped the bolts out. I cut the cable. I threw the dish into the yard. It landed with a sad, metallic clang. I squirted silicone into the holes. I climbed down. I kicked the dish. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, looking concerned. "No," I said. "I'm not okay. I'm going to pay their stupid fine. I'm going to comply. But Sarah, I'm not done." "Jack, don't do anything stupid." "I won't do anything stupid," I said, walking past her into the house. "I'm going to do something smart. I'm going to do something so legally airtight that Gavin is going to wish he had never learned the alphabet." I went into my office. I sat down at my computer. I opened a browser. I didn't know what I was looking for yet. I just knew I needed a loophole. I needed a weapon. I searched for HOA laws. I searched for federal overrides. I searched for things you can build that annoy neighbors but are legal. I read about bat houses. Protected but too smelly. I read about solar panels. Protected but expensive, and Gavin would just regulate the placement. I read about native plant gardens. Gavin would measure the grass height anyway. And then, to around 2 a.m., my eyes burning from the blue light of the monitor, I found it. It was an old forum post on a site that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1999. The background was black. The text was neon green. The thread was titled, "The Nuclear Option, PRB1 and You." I clicked it. Federal Regulation PRB1, the text read, issued by the Federal Communications Commission, states that local governments and zoning authorities must reasonably accommodate amateur radio communications. They cannot preclude the installation of effective antennas. I leaned closer. Case law suggests that HOAs, while private contracts, cannot effectively ban amateur radio operation if it prevents the operator from receiving a signal. And to receive a signal? I scrolled down. You need height. Verticality is key. The federal government recognizes the importance of amateur radio for emergency communications. A tower is not just a structure, it is a necessity for the service. A tower. Not a dish, not a wire. A tower? I looked at the image attached to the post. It was a picture of a guy standing next to a 40-foot steel lattice tower in a suburban backyard. It was massive. It was industrial. It was undeniably, aggressively ugly, and it was federally protected. I felt a smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a Bond villain who just realized the laser is fully charged. "Amateur radio," I whispered. I didn't know the first thing about radio. I didn't know Morse code. I didn't know what a frequency was. But I was a quick learner. And for the chance to stick a 40-foot steel spike into the heart of Gavin's precious skyline, I would become the greatest radio operator this country had ever seen. I pulled out my credit card. I ordered a study guide. Technician Class License Prep 2024 edition. I hit purchase. The game wasn't over. The game had just changed. Gavin thought he was playing checkers. He thought he could just flip the board and declare victory. He didn't know I was about to switch to 3D chess with high-voltage accessories. I printed out the receipt for the book. I stared at it. "Checkmate, Gavin," I said to the empty room. "Checkmate." The Amazon package arrived 2 days later. It landed on my porch with a heavy thud, the sound of knowledge arriving to do violence. I brought it inside like I was smuggling contraband. I cut the tape. I pulled out the book. The ARRL Ham Radio License Manual. The cover featured a smiling man in a plaid shirt sitting in front of a radio that looked like the dashboard of a 747. He looked happy. He looked fulfilled. He looked like a man who didn't have a neighbor named Gavin. I, on the other hand, looked like a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown fueled by caffeine and vengeance. I opened the book. Chapter 1. Welcome to Amateur Radio. "Welcome indeed," I muttered, cracking a fresh beer. I sat at the kitchen table. My wife, Sarah, walked in. She was holding a basket of laundry. She stopped. She looked at the book. She looked at me. She looked at the beer. "Jack," she said, her voice filled with that specific tone of weary suspicion that only spouses of obsessive men can master. "What is that?" "It's a book." "Honey?" "I can see it's a book. Why are you reading a manual for radio?" "It's a new hobby," I lied. "I need a hobby. You said I need a hobby. You said I spend too much time yelling at the TV during Giants games. This is constructive. This is educational. This is..." Science. She narrowed her eyes. She walked over and picked up the book. She read the back cover. Amateur radio, communicating with the world, emergency preparedness. She looked at me. Jack, does this have anything to do with the satellite dish? I took a sip of beer. I don't know what you're talking about. Jack? Okay, fine. I slammed the beer down. It has everything to do with the dish. It has everything to do with Gavin. Do you know what this is, Sarah? This isn't just a book. This is a key. A key to a federal loophole so big I can drive a semi-truck through it. I pulled up the web page I had bookmarked on my iPad and shoved it toward her. Read this. PRB 1. Federal preemption. She read it. Her lips moved slightly. State and local regulations must reasonably accommodate amateur service communications. She looked up. So? So, I said, leaning forward, my eyes wide. To communicate reasonably, you need an antenna, and not just a little wire. To talk to the world, Sarah, you need height. You need a tower. If I get this license, the HOA can't stop me. They can't ban it. They can only regulate it, but they can't prevent it. If I say I need a 40-foot tower to talk to, I don't know, Lithuania. They have to let me build it. Sarah stared at me. She looked at the book. She looked at the iPad. iPhone. A slow smile spread across her face. It was the smile of a woman who had also received a nasty letter from Gavin about leaving a garden hose out overnight. How big of a tower? She asked. Big, I said. Ugly, industrial. The kind of thing that lowers property values just by existing. She kissed me on the forehead. You study hard, honey. I'll make coffee. And so the studying began. I haven't studied for anything since college. My brain is mostly filled with logistics schedules, shipping rates, and the 1990 Giants roster. Trying to cram physics and electrical engineering into it was like trying to shove a marshmallow into a coin slot. I learned about Ohm's law. Voltage equals current times resistance. I didn't care about voltage. I only cared about resistance. Specifically, the resistance I was going to get from the HOA board. I learned about frequency bands. The 2-meter band, the 70-centimeter band, the HF bands. It was a foreign language. I walked around the house muttering mnemonics. Bad boys rape our young girls, but Violet gives willingly. That's the resistor color code. Black, brown, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet, gray, white. It's problematic, I know. It's old school. But it stuck. I was reciting it in the shower. I learned about standing wave ratio and impedance matching. I didn't understand half of it. I just memorized the answers. If the question asks about SWR, the answer is usually 1. 1. I became a hermit. I stopped watching football, mostly because I didn't have the dish anymore. I stopped mowing the lawn, which resulted in another warning letter from Gavin, which I used as a bookmark. I lived in the world of decibels and dipoles. 2 weeks later, I was ready. I found a testing session. It was being held at the local fire station on a Saturday morning, administered by the Metro South Amateur Radio Club. I drove there in my truck. I felt like an imposter. I wasn't a radio guy. I was a guy who liked streaming Netflix and not talking to strangers, but spite is a powerful motivator. Spite will make you learn Mandarin if it means you can insult someone in a language they don't understand. I walked into the fire station community room. It smelled exactly as I expected. Stale donuts, floor wax, and aggressive virginity. There were about 20 guys in the room. Most of them were over 60. Most of them were wearing vests with pockets. So many pockets. What did they keep in them? Tubes, transistors, ham sandwiches? They were gathered in little clusters, speaking a dialect of English that I barely recognized. Yeah, I was working 20 meters last night. Propagation was wide open to Europe, one guy said. He had a call sign embroidered on his hat. W0RRY. Fitting. I'm thinking of putting up a new dipole for 40, another guy said. But the XYL is giving me grief about the wires in the trees. I had learned from the book that XYL stands for ex-young lady, which is ham speak for wife. If I ever called Sarah an ex-young lady, I would be sleeping in the truck. I walked up to the registration table. A man with a beard that looked like a bird's nest sat there. He had 3 pens in his shirt pocket and a badge that said Volunteer Examiner. "Name?" he grunted. "Jack Miller," I said. "Here to take the technician exam." He looked at me over his spectacles. "You bring your $35? "Cash," I said, sliding the bills across the table. "You bring your pencil?" "2 of them." "Good man. Sit over there." He pointed to a row of folding tables. I sat down. Next to me was a kid who looked about 12 years old. He was vibrating with excitement. "I'm going for my extra class today," the kid whispered to me. "I built my own transceiver out of a toaster and a calculator." "That's cool," I whispered back. "I'm doing this because my neighbor is a fascist." The kid blinked. "Oh, good luck." "You too." The test began. 35 questions. Multiple choice. I looked at the first question. Which of the following is a purpose of the amateur radio service as stated in the FCC rules and regulations? A. Providing personal radio communications for as many citizens as possible. B. Providing communications for international non-profit organizations. C. Advancing skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. D. All of these choices are correct. I smirked. C. Advancing skills in the technical and communication phases of the radio art. Translation: learning how to build a giant metal structure that makes Gavin cry. I breezed through it. I knew the frequencies. I knew the safety regulations. I knew that you shouldn't touch an antenna while it's transmitting unless you want to cook your internal organs. I finished in 15 minutes. I walked up to the bearded man. "Done already?" he asked, skeptical. "I study fast." He laid a grading template over my answer sheet. He checked the dots. He nodded. He grunted. He checked more dots. Finally, he looked up. "You missed one. Question 14. But you passed. Congratulations. You're a technician." I felt a surge of triumph. I was legal. I was licensed. I could buy a handheld radio and talk to people across town. But a technician license was just the gateway drug. It didn't give me enough frequency privileges to justify the big tower. For the big tower, the one that needed to reach around the globe, I needed access to the HF bands, high frequency. I needed the general class license. The examiner started to sign my paper. "Wait," I said. "I want to take the general." He looked at me. "You study for that too?" "I skimmed it," I lied. I had studied it like my life depended on it. The wait. "Costs another $15 if you fail," he warned. "I won't fail." He handed me the general exam. This was the hard stuff. Propagation theories, circuit diagrams, the real nerdology. I sat back down. The 12-year-old was still working on his extra exam. He gave me a thumbs up. I sweat through my shirt on this one. Question 20 asked about the root mean square voltage of a sine wave. I closed my eyes and pictured Gavin's face. If Gavin is the resistance and I am the voltage, the current is the speed at which I ruin his life. .123. I finished. I handed it in .456. The examiner graded it. He paused. He squinted. He looked at me. .789. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Passed. 32 out of 35. 1112. He signed the paper. Certificate of Successful Completion. 13 of Exa 14 mination. "You going for extra?" he asked. "No," I said. "General is enough for what I need. I just need to reach Europe and annoy a man named Gavin." "Well," the examiner said, extending a hand. "Welcome to the fraternity, Jack. You'll get your call sign in the FCC database in a few days." I walked out of that fire station feeling 10 feet tall. I wasn't just Jack Miller, logistics manager anymore. I was a federally licensed operator. I was a walking, talking, frequency-modulating agent of chaos. The waiting was the hardest part. I checked the FCC Universal Licensing System website every hour. Monday, nothing. Tuesday, nothing. Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. I hit refresh. Name, Miller, Jack, license class, General. Call sign, KW1TE. I stared at it. KW1TE. Kilo Whiskey 1 Tango Echo, I said aloud. It sounded military. It sounded official. If you said it fast, it sounded like quite, as in, quite annoyed. Or quite legal. I printed the license. I didn't just print it on regular paper. I printed it on heavy cardstock. I laminated it. Then I printed the text of PRB1. I highlighted the phrase, "State and local regulations must reasonably accommodate," in neon yellow. I was ready to make my first move. But first, I had to clear the deck. I went into the garage and found the ladder. I marched into the backyard. Gavin was there. Of course he was there. He was pruning his roses. He was wearing a sun hat that made him look like a colonial governor inspecting a tea plantation. He saw the ladder. He stopped pruning. He walked to the fence. "Finally coming to your senses, Jack?" he called out. "Taking down the mounting bracket? I noticed you patched the holes, but the bracket was still up." "Technically, that's still a violation." "Morning, Gavin," I shouted cheerfully. "Yes, you are absolutely right. The bracket is coming down today." "Good," he said, resting his elbows on the fence. "I'm glad to see you're respecting the community standards again. It really is for the best. We can't have everyone just bolting things to their houses. It looks trashy." I climbed the ladder. I had my impact driver. Zip! Zip! The bracket fell into my hand. I climbed down. I walked over to the fence, holding the small, rusted piece of metal. "There you go, Gavin," I said. "Roof is clear, no satellite dish, no bracket, completely compliant with Article 4, Section C." He nodded, satisfied. "I'll note it in the log, and I'll waive the remaining $50 of the fine since you complied within the grace period. Let's just keep it this way, Jack. Clean lines. As to uncluttered views." "Oh, absolutely," I said. "Clean lines are important. But you know, Gavin, I've been doing some thinking." "Oh?" "Yeah, I realized you were right. Television is a waste of time. Passive entertainment. Rotting the brain." "I agree," Gavin said, looking surprised. "I mostly watch documentaries myself." "Exactly. So, I've decided to take up a more active hobby. Something educational. Something that serves the community." "That's wonderful, Jack. Gardening? I can lend you some fertilizer." "No, not gardening," I said. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the laminated FCC license. I held it up. The sun glinted off the plastic. "Radio," I said. Gavin squinted. "Radio? Like, listening to the radio?" "No, Gavin. Transmitting. I'm an amateur radio operator now. Federally licensed. Call sign Kilo Whiskey 1 Tango Echo." He looked confused. "Okay, well, that's fine. As long as you do it inside." I smiled. It was the smile of a shark that had just smelled blood in the water. "Well, that's the thing about radio, Gavin. Physics is a harsh mistress. To talk to people, you need an antenna. And to talk to people far away, you need a big antenna." Gavin's face went rigid. "How big?" "I'm working with a contractor now," I said, keeping my voice breezy. "We're thinking 40 feet, maybe a nice steel lattice tower, right there." I pointed to the center of my backyard, directly in line with his patio doors. Gavin laughed. It was a nervous, tittering laugh. "Jack, be serious. You can't put up a tower. The covenant strictly forbids structures over 8 feet tall. And certainly no antennas." "Ah," I said. "Sequence," pulling out the second piece of paper, the highlighted PRB1 ruling. "See, that's where it gets interesting. Have you ever heard of Federal Regulation PRB1? "No," he said, his eyes darting to the paper. "It's a fascinating read," I said, handing it to him over the fence. "Basically, it says the HOA can't stop me. Federal law trumps the bylaws, Gavin. It's the supremacy clause. High school civics." He took the paper. He read the highlighted section. His hands started to shake. "Reasonably accommodate," he whispered. "Reasonably," I repeated. "And my engineer says 40 feet is the minimum for reasonable communication on the 20-meter band. So, really, I'm being conservative. I could have gone for 60. Gavin looked up. The color had drained from his face. "You're joking. You're doing this because of the dish." "Dish? What dish?" I asked innocently. "I just love radio, Gavin. I love the science of it. I can't wait to show you the blueprints. It's going to be majestic." I turned and walked back toward the house. "You can't do this!" he shouted after me. His voice cracked. "I'll sue you! The board will sue you!" I stopped at the back door. I turned around. "Check the case law, Gavin," I called back. "Palmer v. City of Saratoga Springs. You might want to read up before you spend the HOA's budget on a lawyer. Have a great day. I went inside and locked the door. My heart was pounding. It was better than watching the Giants win the Super Bowl. Now I just had to build the damn thing. I sat down at my computer and typed in the URL for Vertical Solutions. I dialed the number. "Yeah, this is Frank," a gravelly voice answered. "Frank," I said. "My name is Jack Miller. I have a backyard, a federal license, and a neighbor I despise. I need a tower." There was a pause on the other end. Then a low, rumbling chuckle. "I'm listening," Frank said. "I want 40 feet of Roan 25G, I said, rattling off the terms I had learned in the book. "I want a Ham I4 rotator, and I want the biggest, nastiest tri-band Yagi you have in stock. Something that looks like it could intercept alien transmissions." "You got a permit?" Frank asked. "Not yet. That's where you come in. Can we get a permit from the city that bypasses the HOA?" "If you got the license, and you got the cash, I can get you a permit to build a launch pad," Frank said. "The city hates HOAs almost as much as I do. Too much paperwork." "When can you meet?" "Tomorrow morning. Diner on Main, 8 a.m. Bring the site survey." "I'll be there." I hung up. I looked out the window. Gavin was still standing by the fence, reading the paper I had given him. He looked small. He looked defeated. But I knew him. He wasn't defeated yet. He was just regrouping. He would try to stop me. He would try to use the bureaucratic machine to crush me. He didn't realize that I had just hired the bulldozer. The next morning I met Frank. If Gavin was the embodiment of suburban repression, neat, tidy, and weak, Frank was the embodiment of industrial chaos. He sat in a booth at Sally's diner, taking up enough space for 2 men. He was wearing a Carhartt jacket that was stained with grease, mud, and possibly blood. He had a beard that made the examiner's beard look like peach fuzz. I sat down. "Frank?" He looked me up and down. "You look like an accountant." "Logistics manager," I said. "Same difference. You push paper." He took a sip of coffee that looked like motor oil. "So, you want to stick it to the HOA?" "I want to exercise my federally protected rights," I corrected him. Frank grinned. He had a gold tooth. "Right, rights, I like that. Let's see the plot plan." I spread the map of my property on the table. "House is here," I pointed. "Gavin's house is here. The view he cares about is this vector, right here." Frank traced the line with a sausage-like finger. "So if we put the tower here, right in the middle of the easement, we block his view of the mountains completely. Is that legal?" "The easement is for utilities," Frank said. "You're a utility now, kid. You're a communication station. As long as we don't hit the gas line. We can drill to China." He pulled out a napkin and started sketching. He drew a triangular base. He drew guy wires. "No wires," I said. "I want self-supporting. Wires are messy. I want a monolith." "Self-supporting requires a bigger base," Frank said. "More concrete, more digging, more money." "I have a savings account," I said. "It was for a trip to Italy. But honestly, seeing Gavin suffer is better than Venice." Frank laughed. "I like you, Jack. Okay, self-supporting. We'll need a hole 6 feet deep, 6 feet wide, 6 yards of concrete. We'll use a rebar cage that could stop a tank. Once that concrete sets, God himself couldn't pull that tower down." "How much?" He wrote a number on the napkin. It was a big number. It was the price of a decent used car. I looked at it. I thought about the $50 fines. I thought about Gavin's smug face. I thought about the visual blight. "Do it," I said. "I'll file the permit today," Frank said. "The city clerk, Deborah, she owes me a favor. We'll cite PRB-1. We'll cite the safety comms aspect. We'll tell him you're part of the... what is it? Aries? Amateur Radio Emergency Service," I said. "I'm not, but I can join." "Yeah, tell him that. Cities love that volunteer hero crap. Makes them feel safe. We'll get the permit in 48 hours. "And the HOA? "Screw the HOA, Frank said, standing up. "We don't tell them a damn thing until the excavator hits the dirt. Surprise is the element of victory." He shook my hand. His grip was like a vice. "Get your popcorn ready, Jack," Frank said. "We're about to put on a show." I walked out of the diner. The sun was shining. The birds were singing. And somewhere, in a warehouse, a 40-foot piece of steel was waiting to be born. I drove home. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Gavin putting a sign in his yard. Yard of the Month. I parked the truck. I walked past him. "Nice sign, Gavin," I said. "Thank you, Jack," he said, looking wary. "I see you haven't started your radio project yet." "Oh, these things take time," I said. "Permits, engineering, logistics." "Well, just remember," he said, regaining some of his confidence. "The Architectural Control Committee meets next Tuesday. You'll need to present your plans then. And I can tell you right now, they will be rejected." I smiled. "I'll be sure to keep that in mind, Gavin." I didn't tell him that by next Tuesday, the concrete would already be drying. I went inside, opened a beer, and toasted the empty wall where my TV used to be. "Soon," I whispered. Soon. The days leading up to G-Day, groundbreaking day, were filled with a tension that I imagine is similar to what a spy feels before crossing a border. I was living a double life. To the outside world, and specifically to Gavin, I was a beaten man. I walked with my head down. I mowed my lawn in a diagonal pattern exactly as the newsletter suggested. I even waved at Linda when she drove by in her Prius. "He's broken," I heard Gavin tell another neighbor, Bob, while they stood by the mailboxes. "He just needed a firm hand. The bylaws exist for a reason." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted copper. "Enjoy it, Gavin," I thought. "Enjoy your victory lap, because the finish line is a cliff." Tuesday morning. I took a personal day. I told Sarah I had errands. She knew better. She just sighed and said, "Don't get arrested." "No promises," I said, kissing her cheek. I met Frank at the city administration building. It was a drab, brick monstrosity that smelled of bureaucracy, that unique mixture of toner, floor cleaner, and crushed dreams. Frank was wearing a clean shirt, which for him meant a flannel with only one oil stain. He had a roll of blueprints under his arm that looked like a bazooka. "You ready, kid?" he asked, spitting a sunflower seed into a trash can from 10 feet away. "I'm nervous, Frank. What if they say no? What if the city cares about the HOA?" Frank laughed. "The city cares about two things, liability and fees. We're removing the liability with the federal statutes, and we're paying the fees. They don't give a rat's ass about the Whispering Pines color palette." We walked into the zoning and permitting office. In Suwon, there was a glass partition. Behind it sat a woman who looked like she had been stamping forms since the dawn of time. Her nameplate read Deborah. "Frank," Deborah said without looking up. Her voice was flat, like a tire on a rainy day. "What did you break this time?" "Nothing, Deb. I'm building the future." Frank slapped the blueprints on the counter. "Permit for an accessory structure. Telecommunications tower, residential zone." Deborah looked up. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at the blueprints. Then she looked at the address. "Whispering Pines?" She raised an eyebrow. "You know they have a restrictive covenant overlay, Frank. They're going to scream." "Let 'em scream," Frank said. "My client here is federally licensed, FCC, PRB1 ruling, federal preemption." I stepped forward, feeling like I was presenting a badge. I slid my laminated license and the highlighted statute across the counter. "Jack Miller," I said. "General class operator. This tower is essential for emergency preparedness and international goodwill." Deborah looked at the license. She looked at the statute. She looked at Frank. A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You're doing this to tick off the neighbors, aren't you?" she asked. "I am doing this for science, Deborah," I said solemnly. "But if it also happens to cause an aneurysm in the HOA president, that is merely a side effect." She snorted. "I live in an HOA. They fined me for having a bird feeder that wasn't earth tone. I hate them." She grabbed a stamp, a heavy red rubber stamp. She inked it. She hovered it over the application. Thunk, approved. "Building permit hash 40,992, she said, handing me the carbon copy. "You have 6 months to complete construction. Inspections required for the footer and the final structure. Don't electrocute yourself." "Thanks, Deb," Frank said. "You're a saint." Get out of here before I change my mind, she said, waving us off. We walked out into the sunlight. I held the permit like it was the Declaration of Independence. Phase 1 complete, Frank said. Now we get dirty. When? I asked. Monday, Frank said. 7 a.m. I'll bring the big excavator, the one without the muffler. The weekend was torture. I sat on my back porch, drinking beer, looking at the pristine square of grass that was about to become a crater. It was the calm before the storm. The silence was heavy. Sunday night, Gavin was hosting a barbecue. I could smell the charcoal. I could hear the clinking of glasses. I could hear his voice, loud and pompous, carrying over the fence. It's all about standards, he was saying to someone. If you let one person slack off, the whole neighborhood goes to rot. I had to be tough on Jack, but he learned. He respects the authority now. I took a sip of my beer. Oh, Gavin, I whispered to the fence. You have no idea. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. I was up at 5:30. I had coffee. I put on work boots, even though my only job was to point at things. I stood in the driveway, waiting. At 6:55 a.m., the ground shook. It wasn't an earthquake. It was a Kenworth T880 flatbed truck turning onto Whispering Pines Boulevard. On the back was a Komatsu excavator. It was yellow. It was dirty. It was massive. Frank was driving the truck. He honked the air horn. Honk! The sound echoed off the beige houses. Dogs started barking. A curtain twitched across the street. Frank backed the truck up to my driveway. The backup alarm began to sound. Beep, beep, beep. It was piercing. It was the song of my people. He ramped the excavator off the truck. The steel tracks hit my asphalt driveway with a crunch that sounded like bones breaking. My driveway wasn't rated for this. I didn't care. Morning, Frank yelled, jumping down from the cab. He was wearing a neon yellow vest that was blindingly bright. Where do you want the hole? Backyard, I said. Dead center. Frank climbed into the excavator. He revved the engine. A cloud of black diesel smoke puffed into the crisp morning air. He threw the levers. The machine pivoted. The tracks tore up a strip of my lawn as he maneuvered it around the side of the house. Door! He smashed through the wooden gate. He didn't open it. He just drove through it. Wood splintered. Hinges screamed. Oops! Frank yelled over the engine. Clearance was tight. Don't worry about it, I yelled back. Keep going. He rolled into the backyard. The machine looked like a dinosaur in a petting zoo. It was comically out of place among the rhododendrons and garden gnomes. Frank positioned the bucket. He didn't hesitate. He plunged the steel teeth into the manicured fescue. Crunch. The first scoop of dirt came up. It was rich, dark soil. Gavin's prized soil. Stop! Stop! The scream came from the left. I turned. Gavin was sprinting across his lawn. He was wearing a silk robe that was flapping open, revealing boxer shorts with little sailboats on them. He scrambled up to the fence, his face a mask of pure terror. Jack! What are you doing? What is that machine doing? I walked over to the fence. The excavator roared behind me. Frank dumped the dirt into a pile. Thud. Hey, Gavin! I shouted, cupping my hands. Just doing a little yard work. Yard work! You're destroying the sod. You're making a noise disturbance. It's 7 a.m. City noise ordinance starts at 7 a.m., Gavin. We're right on schedule. What are you building? He shrieked. Is it a pool? You can't build a pool without a variance. The setbacks, the drainage. Not a pool, I yelled. Then what? A koi pond? A bunker? It's a footer, Gavin, a structural base. For what? Frank revved the engine again, drowning out my answer. I just smiled and tapped my ear, pretending I couldn't hear him. Gavin ran back to his house. I saw him fumbling with his phone. He was calling the cavalry. By 8 a.m., the hole was waist deep. We had hit the sprinkler lines. Water was spraying everywhere, creating a mud pit. Frank just laughed and kept digging. We'll cap those later, he yelled. At 8:15 a.m., the first police car arrived. It was Officer Miller again. The poor guy looked like he needed a vacation. He walked into the backyard, stepping gingerly over the tire tracks. Gavin was right behind him, fully dressed now, clipboard in hand. There, Gavin pointed. Look at the destruction, look at the mud. This is a hazard. He's excavating without a permit. Officer Miller looked at the hole. He looked at the excavator. He looked at me. "Morning, Jack," Miller said. "What's the project?" "Communication Station Foundation," I said. I pulled the permit out of my back pocket. It was already in a plastic sleeve to protect it from the mud. "City Permit 40992, approved and stamped." Miller took the permit. He read it. He looked at the stamp. "He's good, Gavin," Miller said, handing it back. "It's a valid building permit." "But the HOA," Gavin sputtered. "The Architectural Control Committee hasn't approved this. It's a violation of the bylaws." "I've told you before, sir," Miller said, his patience thinning. "I don't enforce your bylaws. I enforce the law. If he has a city permit, he can dig a hole to the center of the earth for all I care. Unless he hits a gas line or a body, I'm done here." "This is negligence," Gavin screamed. "He's lowering my property value in real time." "Have a nice day, gentlemen," Miller said, turning around. Gavin stood there, trembling. He looked at the hole. He looked at me. "You won't get away with this," he hissed. "I'll call the city. Tonsum. I'll call the EPA. I'll find something." "You do that, Gavin," I said. "In the meantime, you might want to close your windows. It's gonna get dusty." Frank dropped another bucket of dirt. A cloud of dust drifted over the fence and settled on Gavin's patio furniture. Gavin let out a strangled cry and ran inside. By noon, the hole was massive. It was 6 feet deep and 6 feet wide. It looked like a grave for a hatchback. "Ready for the rebar?" Frank asked, shutting down the machine. The silence that followed was deafening. "Let's do it." Frank's crew arrived in a pickup truck. 2 guys who looked like they ate concrete for breakfast. They jumped into the hole and started weaving a cage of steel reinforcement bars. It was thick steel, #6 rebar. They wired it together until it looked like a bank vault. "That's not going anywhere," Frank said, admiring the work. "Now we pour." "When?" "Tomorrow. I got 3 trucks coming, 9 a.m. That night, the neighborhood was abuzz. I could see people walking their dogs, slowing down as they passed my house, craning their necks to see the destruction. "I heard he's building a bomb shelter," I heard a teenager say. "No, my dad said it's a 5G tower. We're all going to get brain control." I sat on the porch, watching the sunset over the mound of dirt. It was the ugliest thing I had ever seen, and it was beautiful Tuesday morning. The pour. If you want to intimidate a suburban neighborhood, bring in a cement mixer. Bring in 3 of them. They lined up on the street, their drums turning slowly, a grinding, churning sound that vibrated in your chest. Doer. The drivers were rough men who smoked cigarettes and didn't care about blocking driveways. Gavin was out there immediately. "You're blocking the fire lane," he shouted at the first driver. "I'm pouring concrete, pal," the driver said, not even looking at him. "Move or get splashed." They extended the chute. The gray sludge began to flow. It filled the hole. It covered the rebar. It rose higher and higher. It was thousands of pounds of permanence. Frank set the anchor bolts. These were 3 massive steel bolts, each 2 feet long, sticking out of the wet concrete in a perfect triangle. They were the interface, the point where the earth would meet the sky. "That's it," Frank said, smoothing the top with a trowel. "Now we wait. 7 days for the cure. Don't touch it. Don't look at it wrong. Let chemistry do its work." 7 days, I said. "Gavin is going to lose his mind." "That's the plan," Frank grinned. The waiting game began. Day 1, Gavin put a letter in my mailbox. Cease and desist order from the HOA board. It cited 5 different articles. I taped it to my refrigerator. Day 2, Gavin hired a lawyer. I got a letter from a firm called Dewey Cheatham and Howe. Okay, not really, but it felt like it. It threatened an injunction. I called my own lawyer, a guy named Saul, no relation, who specialized in amateur radio law. Yes, that's a real thing. "Ignore it," Saul said. "They can't get an injunction against a federally permitted safety facility without a hearing, and by the time we get a hearing, the tower will be up. Once it's up, the burden of proof shifts to them to prove it's unreasonable. And since the FCC defines reasonable as allowing communication, they lose." Day 3, it rained. The mud from my yard flowed under the fence and onto Gavin's patio. He came over, banging on my door. "Your mud is on my travertine tile," he screamed. "It's an act of God, Gavin," I said. "Erosion, very natural." "I'm sending you the cleaning bill." "Send it to the legal department," I said, slamming the door. Day 4. I saw Gavin out in the yard with a tape measure. He was measuring the distance from the concrete base to the property line. 10 feet, he shouted triumphantly. "The setback is 12 feet for accessory structures." I opened the window. "Check the city code for essential services, Gavin. Setback is 5 feet. He threw the tape measure on the ground. Day 5. Silence. This was the scariest day. Gavin wasn't yelling. He wasn't writing letters. He was just watching. He sat in his window, staring at the drying concrete. He was plotting. Day 6. Frank came by to check the cure. He hit the concrete with a hammer. "Ping." "Hard as a rock," Frank said. "We erect tomorrow." Tomorrow? I felt a flutter in my stomach. This was it. The point of no return. Tomorrow. I booked the crane. 8 a.m. Crane? Yeah. You can't lift 40 feet of steel by hand, Jack. We need a crane, a big one. The neighbors are going to freak out. "Let 'em," Frank said. "It's going to be a show." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I wondered if I had gone too far. I wondered if spending $15,000 to annoy a neighbor was a sign of mental illness. Then I remembered the satellite dish. I remembered the look on Gavin's face when he handed me that first fine. I remembered the smug condescension. No, I hadn't gone too far. I hadn't gone far enough. I got up. I went to the window. The moonlight reflected off the 3 steel bolts sticking out of the ground in the backyard. They looked like a promise. "Tomorrow, Gavin," I whispered. "Tomorrow we touch the sky." The sun rose on erection day. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, perfect visibility. At 7:45 a.m., the crane arrived. It was a Liebherr all-terrain mobile crane. It was yellow. It had 8 wheels. It was the size of a city bus. It turned into the cul-de-sac. It took up the entire road. The driver had to maneuver back and forth 3 times just to make the turn. Beep, beep, beep. Every dog in a 3-mile radius started barking. The driver extended the outriggers. These massive hydraulic legs slid out and planted themselves on the asphalt. Hiss! Thunk! The crane lifted itself off its tires. It was now an immovable object. Neighbors were coming out of their houses in bathrobes, coffee mugs in hand, staring in open-mouthed horror. What is that? Is a plane crashing? Is Jack building a skyscraper? Frank arrived a minute later with the flatbed truck. Strapped to the back were the tower sections. 4 10-foot sections of gleaming galvanized steel lattice. And the antenna. The antenna was the showstopper. It was a Moseley Piro 67. It had 7 elements. The longest boom was 24 feet. It looked like something you would use to track Soviet submarines. Gavin came out. He didn't scream this time. He didn't run. En arnte. He just walked to the end of his driveway and stood there, looking at the crane. He looked like a man witnessing the apocalypse. "Frank," I said, walking up to the truck. "Let's do this." Frank hooked the rigging to the first section. He signaled the crane operator. "Up on the load." The engine roared. The cable tightened. The steel section lifted into the air. It swung gracefully over my house, over the roof, and hovered above the backyard. I ran to the backyard to guide it. Frank was already there, standing on the concrete base. "Lower, lower!" Frank yelled. The steel met the bolts. Clank! Frank spun the nuts. He took a massive wrench and tightened them. "Base is set," he yelled. "Send the next one." Section 2, 20 feet. It rose above the fence line. Now the neighbors could see it from their yards. Section 3, 30 feet. It was now taller than the house. It was casting a shadow on Gavin's roof. Section 4, the top section, 40 feet. It was massive. Standing at the bottom, looking up, it felt like I was at the foot of the Eiffel Tower. It was a geometric web of steel against the blue sky. "Time for the crown!" Frank yelled. The antenna was lifted. It looked like a giant metal skeleton flying through the air. The crane lowered it onto the mast. Frank bolted it down. He connected the coax cable. He taped it up. "Clear!" Frank shouted. "Crane down!" The crane boom retracted. The engine idled down. Silence returned to the neighborhood, but the skyline was changed forever. Where once there was only blue sky and tasteful rooflines, there was now a 40-foot obelisk of defiance. The antenna sat on top, its aluminum arms spread wide, embracing the signals of the world. I stood there, neck craned back, shielding my eyes. It's huge," I said. "It's beautiful," Frank said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That's a serious piece of hardware, Jack." I looked over at Gavin's house. The antenna was perfectly positioned. At certain times of day, the shadow of the director element would fall directly across his living room window. The back gate opened. I expected the police. I expected a SWAT team. Instead, it was just Gavin. He walked into the yard. He walked right up to the base of the tower. He put his hand on the galvanized steel, as if testing to see if it was real. He looked up. He kept looking up until his hat almost fell off. He slowly lowered his gaze to meet mine. His eyes were dead. There was no fight left in them, just a profound existential confusion. "Why?" he whispered. "Just why?" "Because," I said, patting the cold steel. "I wanted to watch the game, Gavin. I just wanted to watch the game." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he shook his head, turned around, and walked back to his house. He didn't run. He shambled. I watched him go. I felt a pang of something. Not guilt, exactly. Maybe pity. He was a man who lived for rules, and he had just been beaten by a bigger rule. Frank clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Well, you're on the air, kid. You want to go inside and see if it works?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's fire it up." We went inside. The Radio Shack was ready. I sat at the desk. I turned on the power supply. The radio lit up. I spun the dial. The static hissed. And then, voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds of them. Languages I didn't recognize. Accents from every corner of the globe. I had done it. I had beaten the HOA. I had beaten Gavin. But as I sat there, listening to the hum of the world, I realized something. I didn't just build this to beat Gavin. I built it because deep down I wanted to know if I could. I wanted to know if a guy with a logistics job and a mortgage could still rage against the machine and win. I grabbed the microphone. My hand was shaking slightly. "CQ, CQ, CQ, I said. "This is KW1TE, standing by?" I waited. And then, from the static, a voice answered. "KW1TE, this is VK3. Melbourne, Australia. You're 5'9", mate. Booming in. What are you running over there?" I smiled. A real smile. "Just a little homebrew project," I said. "Just a little piece of freedom." The first week of living with the monolith was a period of adjustment. For me, it was adjusting to the fact that I now owned a structure that looked like it belonged at Cape Canaveral. For the neighborhood, it was adjusting to the fact that their property values were now theoretically tied to my ability to not accidentally irradiate the block. But for Gavin? For Gavin, it was the 5 stages of grief, played out in real time, on his patio. Stage 1. Denial. He pretended it wasn't there. I would see him in his backyard, aggressively barbecuing, refusing to look up. He would stare at his burgers with an intensity that suggested they held the secrets of the universe, all while a 40-foot shadow crept across his grill like a sundial of doom. Stage 2. Anger. This manifested in passive-aggressive signage. He put a sign on his front lawn that said, "We support neighborhood aesthetics." I countered by putting a small sticker on my mailbox that said, "We support the ionosphere." Stage 3. Bargaining. He came over on a Tuesday. He offered to buy me a streaming subscription for life if I took the tower down. "Sunday ticket, Jack. For life. I'll pay for it personally." "It's not about the football anymore, Gavin," I told him, polishing a connector. "It's about the brotherhood of the airwaves." Stage 4. Depression. He stopped wearing his polo shirts. He started wearing sweatpants, loose sweatpants. Stage 5. Acceptance? Not yet. We weren't there yet. because I was about to accidentally trigger a relapse into stage 2. It happened on a Friday night. I had decided that my signal wasn't strong enough. Sure, I could talk to Australia. But could I talk to Australia loudly? I went online and bought a linear amplifier, an Ameritron AL811. It's a heavy metal box with glowing vacuum tubes inside that takes your radio signal and injects it with steroids. It turns 100 watts into 600 watts. It's the difference between shouting across a room and shouting through a megaphone while standing on a tank. I hooked it up. I let the tubes warm up. They glowed a warm, menacing orange. I put on my headphones. I tuned to 14.250 megahertz. CQ, 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 I said, leaning into the mic. This is KW1TE, running the kilowatt. Testing, 1, 2, 3. I released the push-to-talk button. Immediately, my phone rang. It was Gavin. Hello, Gavin, I said. Jack! He screamed. But he sounded terrified. Jack, are you in my house? No, Gavin. I'm in my house. Then why is your voice coming out of my toaster? I paused. Your toaster? My smart toaster and the baby monitor and the subwoofer in the living room. I'm trying to watch The Crown and all I hear is Kilo whiskey. One tango echo booming out of the walls. My wife is crying, Jack. She thinks the house is possessed. I looked at the amplifier. I looked at the output meter. I was pumping a lot of RF energy into the air. Apparently, Gavin's house, being only 20 feet away, was acting as a giant receiver. The cheap electronics in his smart home weren't shielded enough to handle the freedom I was dispensing. That's called RFI, Gavin, I explained calmly. Radio frequency interference. It happens when consumer electronics aren't properly shielded. Sounds like a manufacturer defect on your end. Defect? You're microwaving my family. I'll turn down the power, Gavin. Relax. But you might want to wrap your toaster in tinfoil, just a tip. I turned off the amp. The screaming stopped. But the war was back on. The following Monday, the letter arrived. It wasn't a fine this time. It was a summons. Notice of emergency board meeting regarding the nuisance structure at 402 Maple Drive. It was scheduled for Thursday, and this time the letter had included the name of a law firm, Stevens, O'Malley, and Associates. Gavin was bringing out the big guns. He wasn't just using the HOA bylaws anymore. He was going for a civil suit. Nuisance? Safety hazard? Interference with quiet enjoyment. I called Frank. Frank, I said, they're suing. Let 'em, Frank grunted. You got a lawyer? I have a guy I used for my closing. He's a real estate attorney. No, Frank said. You don't need a real estate attorney, you need a shark. You need Saul. Who is Saul? Saul is a ham. Call sign W3 Law. He specializes in PRB1 cases. He hates HOAs. He eats board members for breakfast. I'll text you his number. I called Saul. Jack Miller? A smooth baritone voice answered. Frank told me you built a 40-footer in a Covenant neighborhood. I saw the pictures on the forum. It's hideous. I love it. They're dragging me to a meeting on Thursday, I said. They have a lawyer. I'll be there, Saul said. Don't say a word until I arrive. And Jack? Yeah? Bring the amp. Crank it up right before you leave. Let's set the mood. Thursday night. The community center basement again. The vibe was different this time. It wasn't just the three stooges, Gavin, Linda, Ken. There was a man in a suit sitting next to Gavin. A tailored suit. He had a briefcase that looked like it cost more than my first car. The room was packed. The entire neighborhood had shown up. They were divided into factions. The Beige Brigade, Gavin's loyalists, sat on the left. The Chaos Crew, people who secretly hated Gavin, sat on the right. I walked in. I was wearing jeans and a t-shirt that said NASA. Gavin stood up. He looked tired, but determined. This meeting is called to order, he said. We are here to address the monstrosity that has been erected by Mr. Miller. This structure is a blatant violation of our community standards, a safety hazard, and a source of electronic harassment. He gestured to the lawyer. My name is Mr. Stevens, the lawyer said. He didn't stand up. He just leaned back. I represent the Whispering Pines HOA. Mr. Miller, we are prepared to file for an immediate injunction to remove the structure. We are also seeking damages for the loss of property value and the emotional distress caused to the board members. We have statements from 3 neighbors claiming your radiation is causing headaches. Note: it's radio waves, not gamma rays, but facts rarely matter in an HOA meeting. We are offering you a settlement, Stevens continued. You remove the tower at your own expense within 7 days, pay the accumulated legal fees of $5,000, and sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding this dispute. If you agree, we won't sue for the additional damages. The room was silent. Linda was nodding vigorously. Gavin looked vindicated. The door at the back of the room opened with a loud creak. Dut. A man walked in. He was wearing a rumpled suit and carrying a battered leather satchel. He looked like a detective from a 1970s noir film. "Sorry I'm late," he boomed. "Traffic on I-25 was a nightmare. Someone hit a deer." He walked to the front of the room, pulled up a folding chair, and sat down next to me. He didn't look at Gavin. He looked at the lawyer, Stevens. "Saul Goodman?" Stevens asked, sneering slightly. Not his real name, but close enough. "Saul Zimmerman," Saul corrected. "Call sign Whiskey 3 Lima Alpha Whiskey. I represent Mr. Miller and his federally licensed station." Saul opened his satchel. He pulled out a stack of papers that was 3 inches thick. He dropped it on the table. Thud. "What we have here," Saul began, his voice dropping to a conversational purr, "is a misunderstanding of the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution." "We know about PRB 1, Stevens dismissed. "It requires reasonable accommodation." "We argue that a 40-foot tower is unreasonable in a dense suburban environment. There are alternatives. Attic antennas, flagpole antennas." Saul smiled. "I'm glad you brought that up. Marchand v. Town of Hudson. The court ruled that a reasonable is determined by the amateur's communication goals, not the town's aesthetic preferences. Mr. Miller wants to work DX, long distance. Physics dictates he needs a Yagi at a half wavelength height. For the 20-meter band, that's 35 feet. He's at 40. He's barely above the minimum." Saul leaned forward. "Furthermore, Mr. Stevens, are you aware that the HOA is a corporation?" "Yes." "And are you aware that by attempting to enforce a covenant that conflicts with federal policy, you are engaging in what we call bad faith enforcement? If you sue us, we will countersue. We will countersue for harassment. We will countersue for discrimination against a federal licensee, and—" Saul paused for dramatic effect. "We will file a discovery request for all emails and text messages between board members regarding Mr. Miller." Gavin went pale. "I know how these boards work," Saul said, looking directly at Gavin. "I know you talk about residents. I know you call them names. I know you conspire to selectively enforce rules. If we go to court, everything becomes public record. Every nasty text. Every email about Mrs. Higgins's squirrel. Everything." Gavin looked at Linda. Linda looked at her shoes. "Also," Saul added, "I've reviewed your HOA financials. You have a reserve fund of $40,000. A federal court case will cost you at least $60,000. You will bankrupt the association. You will have to levy a special assessment on every homeowner in this room to pay for your grudge against Mr. Miller." Saul turned to the audience. "How about it, folks?" he asked. "Who wants to pay a $2,000 special assessment so Gavin can feel like a big man? Raise your hands." Silence. Then, from the back, Bob spoke up. "I don't want to pay $2,000, Gavin. I don't care about the tower that much." "Me neither," said Mrs. Higgins. "Jack fixed my toaster the other day. He's a nice boy." "I hadn't fixed it. I just told her to unplug it and plug it back in. But I took the credit." "This is ridiculous!" Gavin shouted, standing up. "It's the principal." "The principal is costing us money," someone yelled. Stevens, the lawyer, leaned over and whispered something in Gavin's ear. Gavin shook his head. Stevens whispered more urgently. He pointed at Saul's stack of papers. Gavin slumped. He looked like a balloon that had been pricked. "Fine," Gavin muttered. "Excuse me?" Saul said, cupping his ear. "My hearing isn't what it used to be, too much static." "Fine," Gavin yelled. "We'll drop it. Keep the damn tower. But if it falls on my house, I'm owning everything you have." "If it falls on your house," I said cheerfully, "I'll come over and help you rebuild. That's what neighbors are for." Saul closed his satchel. "Pleasure doing business with you, gentlemen." We walked out of the basement. I felt like I was floating. "That was amazing," I said to Saul in the parking lot. "What was in the stack of papers? Case law?" Saul laughed. He opened the folder. It was empty except for a few takeout menus and a crossword puzzle. "The stack is a prop, Jack. It's always a prop. But the thread about discovery? That's real. They always have dirty laundry." He got into his beat-up Volvo. 73, Jack. Keep the power up." The war was over. The occupation began. The tower became a permanent fixture of the neighborhood. It was strange how quickly people got used to it. It went from being an eyesore to being a landmark. "Turn left at the giant antenna," I heard a delivery driver say on his phone. "Yeah, the one that looks like a spaceship landing pad." Gavin, however, did not adapt. He resigned from the board 2 weeks after the meeting. He cited health reasons, but we all knew the reason was 40 feet of galvanized steel. He stopped taking care of his lawn. The grass grew to 3 inches, then 4. It was a silent protest, a surrender to the chaos. I actually started to feel bad for him. Just a little. One Saturday, I was in the backyard, tuning the antenna. I saw Gavin sitting on his patio. He was just staring at the fence. No clipboard, no phone, just a man and his misery. I walked over to the fence. "Gavin," I said. He flinched. "What? Is my toaster going to sing again?" "No, I put a ferrite choke on the line. It should be clean." "What do you want, Jack? You won. You have your phallic symbol of dominance. Leave me alone." "I was just wondering," I said. "Do you want to see how it works?" He looked at me, suspicious. "Why would I want to see that?" "Because it's actually kind of cool. And, well, you're the only other person around here who appreciates technical details. Ken thinks it's a magic trick." Gavin hesitated. He looked at the tower. He looked at the back door of his house, as if considering retreat. Then, he sighed. He stood up. He walked to the gate. I let him in. I took him to the radio shack. I showed him the transceiver. I showed him the waterfall display on the monitor, the visual representation of radio signals bouncing off the ionosphere. "This is real time?" he asked, adjusting his glasses. "Yeah. See that spike? That's a guy in Italy." "Italy?" "Yeah. Want to say hi?" Gavin looked terrified. "I can't. I don't have a license." "You can talk if I'm the control operator," I said. "Go ahead. Pick up the mic. Press the button. Say your name." He picked up the microphone like it was a live snake. He pressed the button. "Hello?" he said. "This is Gavin." Static. Then a voice. "Ciao, Gavin. This is Marco in Rome. Beautiful signal today. How are you?" Gavin's eyes went wide. I'm fine, Marco. I'm in Colorado." "Colorado, Rocky Mountains. Very nice. I am drinking espresso. What are you doing?" Gavin looked at me. Then he looked at the radio. A small, genuine smile appeared on his face. I'm just visiting a neighbor," Gavin said. "We're checking the equipment." They talked for 5 minutes. About weather, about coffee, about nothing. When Gavin signed off, he put the microphone down gently. "That was efficient," he said. "No latency, no server lag." "Direct point to point," I said. "Physics." "It's an impressive setup, Jack," he admitted. He looked around the room. "Though your cable management is atrocious. You have wires everywhere. It's a fire hazard." "I'm working on it." "I have some zip ties," he said, "and some Velcro straps. I could bring them over." "That would be great, Gavin." He left. He didn't say sorry. I didn't say sorry. But the next day, a bag of industrial-grade zip ties appeared on my porch. He moved out 3 months later. He told everyone it was because he wanted to be closer to his grandkids in Arizona. But I think he just realized that he couldn't be the king of Whispering Pines anymore. The tower had broken the spell. The neighborhood was no longer a pristine, controlled environment. It was a place where things happened. I helped him load the moving truck. "Take care of the place, Jack," he said, shaking my hand. "I will, Gavin. I'll keep the grass cut." And the tower? I'll keep it greased. He chuckled. He actually chuckled. You're a pain in the ass, Miller. I know, safe travels. He drove away. I watched his beige sedan disappear around the corner. So, here I am. It's been a year. The tower is still standing. It's weathered a few storms, a blizzard, and a flock of pigeons that tried to nest in the rotator. I'm an extra-class operator now. I know Morse code, barely. I have cards on my wall from Antarctica, Japan, and the ISS. I didn't start this journey because I loved radio. I started it because I hated being told what to do. I started it out of pettiness, spite, and a refusal to let a man with a clipboard dictate my happiness. But a funny thing happened on the way to revenge. I actually fell in love with it. There's something about sitting in the dark, watching the tubes glow, and knowing that my voice is bouncing off the atmosphere, traveling thousands of miles, and landing in the ear of a stranger who just wants to say hello. It makes the world feel small. It makes the petty squabbles about grass height and paint colors feel even smaller. Sometimes late at night, I go out to the backyard. I stand at the base of the tower. I look up at the red light on top, blinking against the stars. The neighbors still ask about it. New people move in and stare at it. What is that thing? They ask. That? I say, pointing up. That's a monument. To what? To freedom, I say, and to football. They usually look confused and walk away. I go back inside. I turn on the rig. CQ, 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 this is KW1TE, calling any station anywhere. Let's make some noise. The static hisses. And then, the world answers.